Thank you. Well, I do want to introduce the governor now. He is here, and without lots of background, many of you may already know him because you're from Pennsylvania, but if not, he is the 45th governor in Pennsylvania. Began his second term with a landslide election, has been very active in Pennsylvania in the areas of STEM, and I know he's jumping into the middle of our conversation, so I think he'll do a terrific job, and let's all welcome Governor Rendell. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and for those of you who are not from Pennsylvania, I was mayor here for 8 years before being governor, and when I was mayor, I would welcome virtually every conference, convention, exhibition that would come into town, and I would try to give them some useful tip. If there was a particular festival in town or something unusual happening, I would give them a little bit of a tourist tip. And for all of you, I just want you to know, if you're from outside of Philadelphia, you've probably heard a lot about the Philadelphia cheesesteak. And it is something you should absolutely experience while you're here. And no offense to the Lowe's, which is a great hotel. I don't know if they're at any of your parties, they're going to serve you little cheesesteak hors d'oeuvres. You have to have a real cheesesteak on South Street or down in South Philadelphia or up in West Philadelphia. And you might be sitting there and saying to yourself, well, what's the big deal? It's steak, cheese on a roll. Well, if you think that would be wrong. And in fact, every time across the nation, someone or some chain tries to replicate the Philadelphia cheesesteak. I go to other cities and I see Philadelphia cheesesteak. I taste them and they're never the same. And the reason is, there are actually three reasons. This is very scientific as well. There are three reasons. They make three basic mistakes in other venues. First and foremost, the biggest mistake is they use good meat. You cannot under any circumstances use good meat. I mean, if you have a cheesesteak at the Four Seasons, you might as well have a shrimp cocktail. The meat has to be fatty and stringy to get the perfect taste. The second thing they do that's wrong is, and this is understandable because it does say cheese steak, in other places they actually use real cheese. You cannot use real cheese because real cheese doesn't melt evenly enough and it doesn't get into the nooks and crannies of the stringy, fatty meat. You have to use Cheese Whiz. Cheese Whiz. And the third thing, most of us, myself included, like grilled or sautéed onions on the cheesesteak. And that's a popular item for most people who eat cheesesteak. And I was in Seattle, a wonderful city. If anybody's here from Seattle, this isn't meant to be derogatory. But I was in Seattle, and I ordered a cheesesteak, and I was standing there watching them, and I ordered it with sautéed onions. And they had the onions on the grill, and the gentleman took the spatula and lifted the onions off. And before he put the onions on the sandwich, he actually drained off the grease. You can't do that. You simply can't do that. So you can only have a real Philadelphia cheesesteak in Philadelphia, but the Surgeon General has required us to warn you that you should only have one, regardless of the length of your stay. Well, it is a pleasure for me to be here. As your executive director said, education in general has been, I think, the driving force of my administration. I'm in my 8th year as governor, term limited. And science education, STEM education, has been of a particular interest to us, and for obvious reasons. One, I do think we have a moral obligation to educate our children so that they can reach their full potential, whatever that is. And I think that's a given, and it's sometimes overlooked. I think that's as important a function of government and the relationship between government and its people as any basic thing that we do. But second, it's all about economic competitiveness. You know, 20 years ago, Pennsylvania competed against Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, New York, New Jersey. Now we compete against Singapore and India and China and France and Germany, and it's a global economy. And more than just a global economy, it's now a global high-tech economy. And we are, if you look at where the growth is in jobs in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has weathered this recession better than any large state in the Union. And the reason is we have a diversified economy. We have the life sciences and biotechnology in both southeast and southwest Pennsylvania. We are according to the Pew Center for the States, we're the third state in the Union in number of green jobs produced since 2003. And that diversity, that emphasis on science, medical devices, pharmaceutical manufacturing, all sorts of green environmental science and remediation, all sorts of those jobs require, of course, first-hand knowledge of technology and science itself. We, like every other state, wrestle with two twin problems, and that is, how do we get our students interested in science, particularly our girls? As you know, we have a dearth of girls in science for whatever reason, and I think there were sociological reasons about it, but we need to get our young people interested in science from an early age. And then two, how do we make sure we have enough science teachers, particularly in hard, underserved areas like rural areas and urban areas. In rural areas, we're trying to bridge that gap a little bit with computer learning. If we can't get a science teacher into a specific district, we do it over the internet. We have science teachers in other areas teach those courses, and obviously that's not preferable at all, and I'll talk about that for a reason. So I think you're as aware as I am why we have to do this. Now, we've been very, very successful. We've been very, very successful because we have, where's that gentleman? Because we have experimented. You know, you're right. Anytime you launch something new, whether it's government, politics, business, science, you never know if it's going to be successful. You have to make your best judgment, and hopefully there'll be some body of research in which you can base your decision. And the Bayer Corporation, which is headquartered in Pittsburgh, the Bayer Corporation promoted a great science program called ASSET. When I was, there you go, when I was running for governor in 2001 and 2002, I did a lot of reading, about all fields, but I read about this ASSET program. It existed in 48 schools, some public, some parochial, some private. And our kids were getting great results. The kids who went through the ASSET program were not only holding their own with international students on science tests, but actually beating them. So I wanted to see what this ASSET program was all about. I investigated, I visited Bayer, I visited an ASSET classroom, and I was convinced that it's something I wanted to do in Pennsylvania as soon as I could.